Today I've got a list of 20 essential 80s nostalgia movies that I personally think every Generation X collector, or even Gen X adjacent collector, should own on physical media. So let's rock this. Hi everyone, how you doing? Welcome back. I'm Fuzz, and today I'm talking about 80s nostalgia movies, and in fact I'm even rocking my Tears for Fears shirt here to commemorate the occasion. But 80s nostalgia movies, that's my jam today, and of course I realize we're dealing with yet again another subjective characterization here, because of course what makes one person feel nostalgic is not necessarily going to hit another person in the exact same way, is it? So nostalgia really is a personal thing, and your feelings of nostalgia are going to largely depend on your own personal experience. But that said, at the same time, I also feel like there are some movies out there that are more universally loved and revered as quintessential 80s movies by a wide swath of the Generation X population, or even those of you who are maybe a little bit younger, a little bit older, but still feel some kind of connection to 80s pop culture. I'm talking about movies that when you hear the title, it almost immediately conjures up warm feelings of nostalgia and reflection, maybe some memories, some personal memories of a bygone era. I'm talking about the kind of films where you almost instantly begin to recall classic scenes from the film, or maybe you recite iconic quotable moments from the film that have ultimately embedded themselves into the lexicon of our popular culture. So today I've got a list of 20 films on physical media that I personally think are typically regarded as quintessential 80s nostalgia movies. When we say 80s nostalgia, I think these are the movies that many people tend to think of. Of course, this is still just my opinion, right? I mean, there are a lot of good movies out there, and there are certainly more than 20 movies that could be considered 80s nostalgia. But these are the 80s gems that I personally think are absolutely essential to any Gen Xer's physical media collection. Now, some of you out there may have some other choices that you would personally pick over a few of the titles that I've chosen for my list, and that's totally okay. So by all means, feel free to participate in the fun here. Drop a comment in the comments section below and let me know what some of your favorites are from the era. One thing to keep in mind for this list is that I decided to expand the genre parameters of the channel for this video to be able to include some other types of film genres beyond the usual action, sci-fi, and horror that I typically discuss on this channel. It just seemed appropriate for this particular list, and you'll see what I mean as we get into things here. But we're going to have some fun here today with this topic. I've really been looking forward to doing this video. Now, before I get into the list here, we do have a couple new Fuzz Club members that I want to give a quick shout out to. First off, Ryan Curtin became a new member of the Fuzz Club. Ryan, thank you so much for that. I really appreciate your support. I've had a chance to chat with you a little bit, and I do look forward to chatting with you more as we move forward. But thanks so much for your support. Also, Mark Deal became a member of the Fuzz Club just the other day. Mark, thank you so much. You're awesome, man. Mark and I have had a chance to chat a little bit as well. In fact, we had a really good conversation the other day talking about aliens and Terminator and whatnot. So seems like Mark and I have quite a bit in common. So Mark, thank you so much for your added support of the channel. I really appreciate it. Really, both Ryan and Mark, you guys are awesome. And your support of the channel means the world to me. I look forward to chatting with you both moving forward. So thank you so much. And if any of you out there would like to learn more about the Fuzz Club, I do have a link in the description down below, or you can just click on the join button below and it'll bring up all the membership information for you. Okay, so without any further ado, let's get right into this list here. And this is not a ranking. These are in no particular order. It's just a random list of nostalgic 80s goodness. So first up, we got to get a big one out of the way here. And this first entry is actually not just a single film, but a series of films, a collection of films, right? Because, you know, I like to cheat on my list sometimes, and it's my channel and I can do what I want. So I think I will. And what I'm talking about here today are the John Hughes Brat Pack movies, right? By my count, about 6 movies, if I got it right here. I am talking about, I mean, John Hughes was huge. John Hughes, you can't have an 80s nostalgia list without having John Hughes on that list. And honestly, I didn't want to take up a whole bunch of slots on this list with a bunch of John Hughes movies. So that's why I decided to do this, this single entry covering all of the John Hughes movies that I think are essential. But I'm talking about Breakfast Club here. I'm talking about 16 Candles, Weird Science, Pretty in Pink, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and then if you want to include this sixth one, I'd say we could also throw in Some Kind of Wonderful in the mix as well. But this is just great stuff. I highly recommend picking up these 2 packs. If you're looking to acquire the John Hughes movies on a budget, this is a great way to go. These are not terribly expensive, and you can get pretty much all of his films in your collection. This one, which includes Breakfast Club, 16 Candles, and Weird Science, I think this one was you'd probably find it for like $15 on Amazon or whatnot. And this one has a couple extra films, so it's a little bit more, like maybe like $20. But I would say for probably less than $40, you can get hooked up on the John Hughes collection here. But I just have such great memories of these films. I think anybody who was coming of age during the 80s, probably felt some connection to these films. It's just classic stuff. My favorite is Weird Science, but I also love The Breakfast Club, and I also love Pretty in Pink. Those 3 are probably my 3 favorites, but I always enjoyed watching pretty much any John Hughes film back in the 80s. And when I pop one of these bad boys on, it just immediately transports me back to the 80s, and definitely a big nostalgia factor with these movies. So yeah, for my first entry is John Hughes movies here. Now, you can get a couple of these on 4K. I don't think there are that many John Hughes movies on 4K. I know that we have Weird Science on 4K and Ferris Bueller's Day Off. I don't know if The Breakfast Club ever got a 4K, but I think if it didn't, I'm assuming Weird Science and Ferris Bueller's are the only 4K discs out there. And I did actually buy the 4K of Weird Science. I loved the Arrow slipcover here. Very cool art. And I like that I got the extended version of the film on the 4K disc as well. Now, some people didn't really like the 4K. They thought it was a little too grainy. I think that really just comes down to how the film was made, the kind of film stock they used at the time and whatnot. But I'm happy I have this, even if it's just, the extended version is only like 3 extra minutes. So, but I wanted those extra 3 minutes, with the extra couple scenes or whatnot. But this is probably my favorite John Hughes film. Like if I were to pick just one John Hughes film for this entry, I probably would have chosen Weird Science, but I just couldn't bring myself to pick only one. So that's why we have an entire John Hughes Brat Pack collection as my first entry. So, but yeah, you just can't go wrong with John Hughes. This one I love in particular because of Bill Paxton's character. Hilarious playing Chet, the kind of older bully brother. Oh man, it's hilarious stuff. I think it's one of the funniest things I've ever seen Bill Paxton do. So, but yeah, great film. And yeah, I just love John Hughes. So that's my first choice. John Hughes, The Brat Pack Collection. All right, next up is a 1983 film that I saw in the theater and loved it and really have some big nostalgia for this particular movie. I'm talking about War Games. Sorry for the reflection there, guys. Just love this movie. Of course, Matthew Broderick, Dabney Coleman, and Ali Sheedy in this one. A great Cold War era movie. The threat of nukes was a big deal back then. So this was a very salient film at the time when it came out. It really tapped into a lot of fears that I think many people had during the height of the Cold War in the 80s back then. People were freaking out and worried about, something going wrong and us all blowing up the world. The funny thing about this film is it's actually a pretty relevant film to today, right? Yeah, the computers are super dated in this film, right? They've got the big giant Whopper computer that takes up a good chunk of a room, and we could probably fit that into something about that big now, the computing processing power that the Whopper had in this movie. But we're still talking about computers being used as a substitute for real humans. And that's always going to be a rather dicey question, right? The idea that computers, or even in our day and age, AI, could become a replacement for real humans, especially when it comes to our national security. Yeah, that's a big deal. So I think this film really does have a lot of relevance to today's world. But I absolutely love this film. Like I said, saw it in the theater, and when I was, what, I guess about 12, and just had a lot of fun with it. And when I got this Shout Factory 4K, I was really excited about it because I hadn't seen it in quite a few years. And it immediately took me back. I remembered all the scenes from this film. Used to watch this all the time on cable TV as well. So it was one of those films that I think has a pretty high rewatch value. And I just think it's an awesome movie. So if by some chance you've never seen War Games, you should definitely pick this up. But again, these are essential titles for any Gen X collection. I definitely think this one is essential. So yeah, War Games. Moving on to number 3 here, we've got a 1984 film, which is such a great year for movies. But I'm talking about The Karate Kid, little Ralph Macchio action, Pat Morita, Elizabeth Shue. Yeah, I mean, you just can't go wrong with The Karate Kid. Now, I really like all 3 of them, you know, Karate Kid 1, 2, and 3. I enjoy the first 3 Karate Kid movies quite a bit. And from what I understand, I guess this box set is, you can't really get this box set anymore. It's out of print now, which really surprised me, but I'm glad I picked it up when I did. But of course, for this entry, we're mainly talking about the first Karate Kid film. That's the big one, right? That's the big nostalgia flick here among the 3, right? I mean, I like the first 3. I like them all, but this first one really is the best, and by quite a bit. So yeah, I mean, another one I saw in the theater when I was young, and absolutely loved it. Those final scenes were just amazing, and you know, we were all cheering Ralph Macchio's character on here. So yeah, just a great film. I don't know how much I can really say about this one. It's not one I watch all that often, but it's absolutely essential for 80s nostalgia, and that's why I bought it, because I bought it for the nostalgia, right? And the memories of seeing this in the theater with my dad when I was young. So yeah, I've always loved The Karate Kid. I even like Cobra Kai too, which the show, right? I love Cobra Kai. I haven't been keeping up on it. I don't think we saw the last season yet. I mean, me and my wife. Because we were watching Cobra Kai together, and we both really liked that show. But I don't think we saw the last season yet. But really good show. I was really happy that they put that show together. And yeah, I'm not even someone who watches series very often. I'm not a big fan of shows and series, but that's one I made an exception for because of how much nostalgia I have for this series, for this movie, and you know, the Karate Kid series in general. So yeah, Karate Kid for my number 3. All right, next up I have a Cameron Crowe film here from 1989. John Cusack and Ione Skye in Say Anything. I love this film. I loved it from the first time I saw it. Great little slice of life type film here. I mean, that's what Cameron Crowe does best, right? Nobody writes slice of life movies quite like Cameron Crowe. He's a master at it. And I loved John Cusack in this movie. I mean, Lloyd Dobler rules. I mean, I think we all fell in love with Lloyd Dobler. He was just awesome. And, you know, I really liked John Cusack back in the day. It's too bad he's kind of lost his marbles and gone off the deep end, because I really did enjoy watching his films back in the day. Whether it's Say Anything or Better Off Dead, which was hilarious, or even some of those side roles that he did in, you know, showing up in like the John Hughes films or whatnot. I always had a lot of fun with John Cusack's movies back in the 80s and a little bit beyond that. Just fun stuff. And what's cool about this film is it's not just a comedy. I mean, it's got a lot of funny, classic, quotable moments from it, but it also has a bit of a serious angle to it as well. It also functions like a drama in some spots. And I really like that about this film. One of the more classic scenes from this film that I absolutely love is when Lloyd Dobler is sitting there with his boombox in front of the Malibu, holding it up like that while Peter Gabriel's In Your Eyes is blasting through it, as he's pining for his girl. And that, even just thinking about that scene kind of gives me chills a little bit. That was such an amazing scene. But when I think of this movie, that's the first image that pops into my head. John Cusack, holding up his boombox and blasting Peter Gabriel through it. Just love it. So such a great film. And if you've never seen it, I would definitely recommend it. But I do think this is a must own for any 80s nostalgia collection, any Gen X collector. Moving right along here from 1982, we've got Tobe Hooper and Steven Spielberg, Poltergeist. And I say both Tobe and Steven because, of course, Tobe is listed as the director on this film. But I think, anybody who watches this, you can make the case that it's probably about 50% Spielberg and 50% Hooper. At least that's how I think of it. I can see the contributions of both directors to this film. It definitely has that Spielberg vibe, right? That kind of suburban, 80s suburban Spielberg vibe. And I love that about this film. I love the vibe. Good cast here with Craig T. Nelson, Jo Beth Williams, and of course, Heather O'Rourke. I think there's a lot of really classic stuff in this. Of course, the TV scene, They're Here. That alone is, I think, an 80s nostalgia moment right there. That is definitely an iconic moment. One thing I love about this film is that you really can see the contributions of both Tobe Hooper and Steven Spielberg. Like I said, Steven Spielberg kind of gives us that classic suburban 80s vibe. But, Tobe Hooper, he's got his quirkiness in here too. And there's certain scenes that I can very much tell that was a Tobe Hooper thing and not a Spielberg thing. And then there are other scenes where you definitely feels like Spielberg was more directly involved. But just a fun film, a great little horror film, or horror thriller, I guess, if you will. But just a fun film. This is a movie, I never saw it in the theaters. I wasn't even that into it back in the 80s. I liked it. I used to watch it on TV. I saw it a couple times in the 80s, but I wasn't as enamored with the film as maybe others were at the time. But then when I revisited the film many years later, I became a much bigger fan of the film. I've always liked it to some degree, but I've really come to appreciate it more in recent years, particularly from that nostalgia angle. I definitely get a lot of nostalgic vibes whenever I watch this. So yeah, just great stuff. So Poltergeist. All right, next up for number 6, we have another 1982 film here, which was 1982 was an amazing year for movies. Let's face it, right? Classic stuff. But I'm talking about a film that has so many quotable moments, so many classic scenes. I'm talking about Fast Times at Ridgemont High. You got Sean Penn here, Judge Reinhold, Phoebe Cates. And then you also got some appearances by, smaller roles by people who would go on to do bigger things, like Forrest Whitaker, for example. A lot of people in this film, and just really cool stuff. Nicolas Cage even pops up in this film briefly. The characters, Jeff Spicoli, Mr. Hand. I loved Mr. Hand. The Little Prick, Damone. Just cool stuff. So many great characters. And of course, Jennifer Jason Leigh in this as well. Amazing cast. Lots of quotable, iconic moments from this film. But this is one that I've always gotten a kick out of. The funny thing about this is when it first came out, my parents wouldn't let me see it, right? I was like 11, and it was deemed too R-rated for my age. And I think I ended up seeing it within like a year. But yeah, at first this was not one that my parents were cool letting me see at that age. I did eventually see it, and I ended up loving it. Just so much fun, and it's definitely a must-own for any Generation X collection, I think. And this is the Criterion Blu-ray, by the way, and great. It looks great too, and it's got some great bonus features as well. So, Fast Times at Ridgemont High. Okay, next up we've got Back to the Future from 1985. I've talked about this one on the channel before, of course. Just another classic film. Michael J. Fox, Christopher Lloyd, Crispin Glover was awesome in this. And, I like all three of the movies, right? It's another one of those deals where I think if you're going to get the first one, you may as well just get a nice little 4K set like this, right? That has all three. Because usually I can't just watch the first one. Usually I have to watch at least the second one after that, because they go together and you want to see what happens next, of course. But really fun films, that even had some great theme music that were big hits. Huey Lewis had a couple songs from the soundtrack, Power of Love and Back in Time. So great music, great cast, and it's a time machine movie, right? And you just can't go wrong with Back to the Future. I'm not sure how much I can really say about it. I mean, you guys all know what this movie is, but an absolute must-own for any 80s nostalgia collection, any Generation X collector. You definitely got to get this one in your collection. And by the way, the 4K on this looks incredible. I would consider it a reference quality disc, or damn near close to reference quality. Especially the first film I was blown away by just how good it looked on 4K the first time I watched this. So if you don't have these films on 4K yet, and you were thinking about upgrading, I would highly recommend doing so. These are definitely among some of the better 4Ks out there, I think. So yeah, Back to the Future. It's really Back to the Future 1, 2, and 3 for me, but really the first one is what we're talking about here because of the impact it had on our pop culture. So yeah, Back to the Future. Next up, from 1981, we have Raiders of the Lost Ark. Of course, I have the Indiana Jones collection here, but I'm primarily talking about Raiders of the Lost Ark. I'm going to let you guys in on a little secret. I haven't even seen any of the other films besides the first two. I've only seen Raiders of the Lost Ark and Temple of Doom. I never got around to watching Last Crusade, even though I've heard so many people say that was a good one, and if not one of the best ones. So I haven't gotten around to watching it, even though I own it, because I have to be in the mood for indie. I'll be honest, I'm only kind of lukewarm on indie, but I love Raiders of the Lost Ark because I saw that in the theater when I was young, and that one I really do like. That one I do get a lot of nostalgia for, but I don't really care as much about the other entries in the franchise. It's primarily the first film that I really love, and and have a lot of childhood memories from, seeing it in the theater and then watching it on cable TV many times after that. So I used to watch it all the time, and a little bit with Temple of Doom too. I mean, I did like Temple of Doom, but I didn't think it was anywhere near as good as the first film. Eventually, I'll get around to watching the other two in this set. I'm not even going to bother with the latest Disney crap. No interest in that at all. But I will eventually get around to watching 3 and 4 here. But for now, for today, just Raiders of the Lost Ark. That is the important one that I felt needed to be on this list. Of course, I'll always say, hey, if you're going to get just one, I mean, you can just get Raiders of the Lost Ark. I think you can actually buy them standalone. I think they did some standalone releases for these films, if I'm not mistaken. So maybe you can just get Raiders by itself. But my advice is, if you're going to go in on something like that, if you're going to get Raiders, you may as well just get them all, right? At least in this set. Like I said, I don't care about the Disney film, but before that, yeah, you may as well just get all of them in case you do want to watch the others at some point, like I'm expecting I will at some point. So yeah, Raiders of the Lost Ark, such a great film, and that's coming in at my number, 8? Yeah, I guess we're up to 8 now. So yeah, Raiders. Moving on to my number 9 now, we've got another 1984 film, Footloose, on 4K here. Great film. This is definitely one that I own it more for the nostalgic value than any other reason. This is a film that I used to watch it a lot in the 80s, but I was always kind of like lukewarm on it. So, I don't think it's like an amazing film or anything, but from a nostalgia perspective, I absolutely love it. And whenever I pop it in, it brings back all these memories of watching it on cable over and over again back in the 80s. But I did used to watch it quite a bit, so I remembered quite a bit of it. But prior to picking this up, I don't think I had seen it in quite a few years. It'd been a long time since I had seen this. And I had a blast getting back in touch with it. And I bought this because I felt that it was kind of an essential 80s film to have in the collection. Even though it's not like my favorite film by any stretch. I mean, there are many other films that I would be more into than something like this. But I absolutely love the vibes I get when I pop this film in. You got Kevin Bacon here. You got Laurie Singer, John Lithgow. Really a great cast. Chris Penn is in this. And it's just a fun film. And if you're looking for some light entertainment that will transport you back in time, you can't go wrong with something like this. So Footloose. For my number 10, a title I've talked about quite a bit on this channel, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this particular release because it's come up so many times. But from 1989, of course, Roadhouse. So many, again, classic, iconic, quotable moments from this film. Patrick Swayze rules. He was just awesome in this. And, Sam Elliott as well. It's a great B action movie, right? And I think that's what the director set out to do. If I remember correctly from like watching the documentary, he wanted to make like the world's best B movie. And you can make the case he kind of did that here. It's just so much fun. I think this film perfectly encapsulates the 80s action film. It's a great representation of what action films were like back in the 80s. But yeah, there's just a whole lot of nostalgia associated with this film for me. And I just love it. So Roadhouse for my number 10. Oh, and of course the 4K looks amazing on this. I've said that before. Just an incredible release here from Vinegar Syndrome, but I'm not going to get too much into that. If you don't have it on 4K, it's definitely one you should get on 4K. The transfer looks amazing. So Roadhouse. By the way, if you're enjoying the content on this channel, do me a favor and please consider subscribing to the channel. And if you do, don't forget to hit that notification bell as well. Activate that notifications so you can be alerted whenever I'm posting videos that you might enjoy. Also, don't forget to like the video as well. It really does help with the algorithm and the channel's visibility on YouTube. Thank you so much for your support. I really appreciate it. Okay, next up we've got a film from 1986 here. It really is the film that put the legendary director Tony Scott on the map. And of course I'm talking about Top Gun, Tom Cruise, Val Kilmer, Kelly McGillis. It's just such a, classic 80s nostalgia film. And the funny thing is, like I like the film, but it's not even one of my favorite Tony Scott films. Like it doesn't even, I don't even know if it makes the top 10. It might make my top 10, but just barely, right? Like there's so many other Tony Scott films I like more than this one. But again, when we're talking about 80s nostalgia, yeah, this is a must-own for the collection. Absolutely. There are so many classic moments from this film and quotable scenes, right? And you definitely get some cheese with this film, right? Some classic 80s cheese. I mean, just the volleyball scene alone is enough to put this on the 80s cheese map. Great stuff, but it's a fun film. I think there are other people out there who are bigger fans of this film than I am, but I still love revisiting it. I still enjoy it when I do go back and watch it. I love the interaction between the characters in this film. Iceman with his teeth. You got to love some of the some of the iconic moments from this film. So yeah, great stuff. So whenever I'm looking to take a trip back in time and get back in touch with my 80s roots, this is definitely one of those films that that fits the bill for sure. So yeah, Top Gun. Moving on to number 12, another 1984 gem here. I'm talking about Ghostbusters. Bill Murray, Harold Ramis, Dan Aykroyd. I mean, this is a great film. Now, this is another one of those films where I'll be the first to admit I'm not nearly as big of a Ghostbusters fan as other people are. But when we're talking about essential 80s films to have in your collection, even I felt that I needed this in my collection, right? I just didn't upgrade it to 4K. You know, I think I'm good with these Blu-rays. Of course, I've got 1 and 2 here in this little double feature pack. You can get these films on 4K as well, but I just haven't gone down that road yet. I felt like I was probably good enough with Blu-ray due to a combination of factors, both my interest in the film and you know, also the quality of the film, like in terms of like how the film was made. You know, the film's a little rough looking, you know. There are some issues at the source, let's say, and that has kind of made me a little bit apprehensive about upgrading to 4K, because I don't know how much they can do with this film to, you know, I don't know how much they can really improve upon this. So but I may get around to eventually getting them all on 4K. I haven't even seen the newer films like Afterlife or whatever. I haven't seen any of that stuff. In fact, I haven't even seen the second film in quite some time, probably since the 80s. Since I got this, I've only watched the first film, rewatched the first film, and that was a couple years ago. So, you know, I'm kind of lukewarm on Ghostbusters, but there's a lot of classic 80s pop culture stuff in this movie, and you know, you got to love what they're doing. It was a unique place in time, you know, when these movies came out. So, and it was just a lot of fun at the time. It was a really lighthearted but fun. Of course, you got Sigourney Weaver in this too, which I think she may be the best thing about the whole movie. You know, next to Bill Murray, but that's of course a matter of opinion, right? So, but yeah, great cast and just a lot of fun. And if you like your 80s nostalgia, I think this is a must-own for anybody who's looking to bulk up on their 80s nostalgia. So yeah, Ghostbusters. Next up from 1982, it's a big one, as we would expect, because 1982 was a big year. But Spielberg's E.T., classic stuff, right? Another film I saw in the theater when it first came out, along with Ghostbusters. I saw Ghostbusters in the theater as well, but this one I definitely saw. I think the whole family saw this. My mom and dad and sister and me all went to see this when it first came out, and it was a special movie at the time. It was huge, and it really made an impact on us as kids, right? And again, this is another one of those movies. I don't watch it very often, you know. I like the movie, but I like other Spielberg films more, you know, the films that came out before these, you know, Close Encounters or Jaws, right? So this isn't one of my favorite Spielberg films, but the vibe and the atmosphere is so quintessentially 80s that I had to have it for my collection. In fact, prior to picking this up, I don't even think I had seen the movie since the 80s. It had been a long time. In fact, probably since about the mid-80s. It had been a long time since I had seen this, so it was really fun revisiting this. This is, by the way, in 4K. Got a little 4K here, there. Let's see here. Take that out for you. This is the 35th anniversary edition, which has a nice rigid hard box there. I love that, and that's why I bought this version. Of course, there's a lenticular slip cover there, or I should say a lenticular slip case, right? Because it is a rigid slip case, but I love that, you know, Elliot and E.T. going across the moon there, right? So, and that's the main reason I bought this particular version. There have been like 40th anniversary editions released since then, but I think this is the coolest version of E.T. in terms of packaging, right? So yeah, good stuff. E.T. from 1982, an absolute classic 80s nostalgia film. Moving on to number 14, another 1984 film here. I swear, it's 82 and 84. Like, I feel like most of the films on this list are from either 82 or 84. I mean, it's not just those 2 years, but there are quite a few titles on this list from those 2 years because they were just such phenomenal years in film history, right? But for this entry, I'm talking about Red Dawn here. Patrick Swayze, C. Thomas Howell. You got Charlie Sheen in this, Jennifer Grey, Powers Booth is in this, Harry Dean Stanton. Yeah, just a great cast. Leah Thompson also in this. So yeah, really, I don't know if this counted as like a Brat Pack movie, but I think it kind of had a couple people in it that were probably associated with the Brat Pack. But this was a really good Cold War era movie, right? I mean, one of those deals where we were at the height of the Cold War, a lot of tension there between the U.S. and the Soviet Union, and so there were a lot of fears out in the public and our popular culture about nukes and the Cold War and how that might not end well for anybody. So you know, this film really capitalized on that sentiment and vibe that so many of us were feeling at the time. And for that reason, I felt it was pretty essential for this list. But yeah, great kind of action drama. You know, commies coming to the U.S. and attacking us, right? And it's bad news all the way around. So, but there is a rebel force that forms and fights back. And I'll just leave it at that. If you've never seen this, it's a great film. So also good Shout Factory or Shout Studios. I don't know what it was when this was released, if they had changed their name yet, but great Shout Studios 4K release. The 4K looks really good. Solid looking 4K. And yeah, great film. So Red Dawn for my number 14. And moving right along to number 15, we got Real Genius. Val Kilmer, one of his best films. This is such a fun film. When did this come out? 1985 for this one. And this is another really good looking 4K. This is put out by I think this was Sony. Yeah. So they did a great job with this 4K. The movie looks fantastic. And this is another one of those that prior to picking up this 4K, I hadn't seen it in many, many years. But I also used to watch this one all the time back in the 80s on cable TV. I loved this film. And it's got some funny moments, some genuinely funny stuff in it. So, I mean, if you've never seen Real Genius, you should definitely check it out. And if you're a Gen Xer and you don't have this in your collection, you definitely need to get this in your collection. Now, maybe you don't need the 4K. I mean, you know, that's a judgment call, you know. Your own mileage may vary, but personally, I was really surprised to see that we even got a 4K release of this title. At the time, I was like, wow, I did not expect that at all. So I was real happy when this came out on 4K. And the transfer on this, it definitely does not disappoint. Lots of pop and depth to the image, great detail in this, and it was just so much fun revisiting this movie after so many years away. It was almost like I had never even left, right? I mean, all the classic moments, all the classic scenes came right back to me, even though it had probably been, at the time, maybe 30 years since I had seen this. So, yeah, so much fun. Like I said, one of Val Kilmer's best, I would say. And yeah, Real Genius. All right, next up, I figured I had to have at least one John Carpenter film on this list. I didn't feel right not including any John Carpenter at all, so I had to pick at least one. Now, trying to figure out which one to include was kind of tricky. I went with the Carpenter film that personally gives me the most nostalgia for the 80s, right? And that film for me was Escape from New York. And, you know, right down to the music, right? The theme song right at the beginning, that is just screams classic 80s stuff. And of course, you know, it's hard to pick a more iconic figure from the 80s than Snake Plissken. I mean, Kurt Russell was a total badass and in this. And yeah, Snake Plissken, Snake rules, right? You gotta love Snake Plissken. I was like, I can't talk about the 80s and 80s nostalgia without talking about Snake Plissken, right? Snake rules. So yeah, just a great film. I've talked about this recently. I've talked about it before, so I'm not going to say too much. I just love the film. Great cast too. Ernest Borgnine in here. You got Adrienne Barbeau, Isaac Hayes, Donald Pleasance. You just can't go wrong with something like this. So yeah, really good film that always takes me back. And it also has a pretty high rewatch value for me. And another reason I thought this film would be a good one for this list is I love the not so distant future aspect of this, right? I mean, it takes place in the future of 1997, right? So that kind of dates it now, but it also gives it kind of a charm that, transports me back to the 80s whenever I watch it. So I love this one, and it's one I can watch quite a bit. It has a pretty high rewatch value for me. So yeah, so for my number 16, Escape from New York. Okay, for number 17, we've got another iconic figure from the 80s, and I'm talking about Gordon Gekko, right? Of course, talking about Michael Douglas in Wall Street, directed by the great Oliver Stone. I love this film. And, Charlie Sheen and Daryl Hannah decorating their apartment to Talking Heads playing in the background. I mean, you got to love stuff like that, right? Just a great film. Of course, this is one of my favorite Michael Douglas roles. Gordon Gekko. Greed is good. You just can't go wrong with something like that. Gordon Gekko, total badass. So yeah, love this film, Wall Street. I've never seen the sequel yet. I think I tried to start watching it once, and I only got probably 15, 20 minutes into it before I tapped out, but I think I probably just wasn't in the mood for it at the time. But the original Wall Street is, yeah, an absolute classic. So yeah, if you've never seen it, you should definitely check this one out. It's definitely got that 80s nostalgia plastered all over it. So yeah, Wall Street. Okay, and moving right along here, we've got another classic from 1987, and I'm talking about The Lost Boys. Got Kiefer Sutherland, Corey Haim, Corey Feldman, Jamie Gertz in this one, Jason Patric. Great film. I love Corey Haim in this. Mom, this place is crawling with vampires. I mean, it cracks me up, right? And of course, seeing the two Coreys interact with each other, it's pretty amusing. Corey Feldman was hilarious in this movie. So yeah, that means a lot of great classic 80s cheese here. Tim Capello on the saxophone. I mean, that is a completely iconic scene that you can't help but be transported back to the 80s when you're watching this. It's just great stuff. So yeah, I love The Lost Boys. The funny thing about this one is this one I actually came to appreciate more later on. Even though I watched it in the 80s when it first came out, it's one that I didn't care for as much until later on in life, right? But now I love it. I think it's a fun film, and it still takes me back to the 80s. It's still got that heavy nostalgia component. So we all watched this movie back in the 80s, and maybe I didn't take to it as much back then as I ultimately ended up taking to it, but I love it. I think it's a great film, and it's a lot of fun. So yeah, The Lost Boys. All right, for number 19, we've got to talk about Beverly Hills Cop, and I'm not just talking about the first one. For this entry, I'm including both Beverly Hills Cop 1 and Beverly Hills Cop 2. Love both of these movies, right? And the reason that I'm including the second one is because it was directed by Tony Scott. And I actually think I like the second one a little bit more than the first. Now, both of these I've got some classic stuff in them, right? And especially the first one. You just can't go wrong with Eddie Murphy. Eddie Murphy rules. So, but I absolutely loved the second one. I don't care about the third one, but I definitely love this one. I think Tony Scott's direction on Beverly Hills Cop 2 gave this film a little bit more of an edge, right? And it was a little more stylish. I think you can make the case this was a more stylish film than this. And that's Tony Scott for you, right? He's all about style. But both of these are just a whole lot of fun. And, when I picked these up on 4K, it's another one of those deals where, I used to watch them back in the 80s quite a bit, but I hadn't seen these for quite some time when I got these 4Ks. And it was a whole lot of fun revisiting these films after all that time. So, like I said, you just can't go wrong with Eddie Murphy. Am I right? So yeah, Beverly Hills Cop 1 and 2. And then my last choice is a film that I talked about fairly recently in my Walter Hill video. This came out in 1985, and I'm talking about Richard Pryor in Brewster's Millions. Love Richard Pryor. You know, you got to have Richard Pryor represented somewhere because he was also a pretty culturally iconic fixture of the 80s, I think you could say. I think that would be the best way to put it. But he's funny in this, and this was just such a fun film. Of course, you got John Candy in this too. It's just a fun film. It's just a lot of fun. It's amusing, but it has a slight dramatic component to it, but it's really just a fun film and a funny film too. So I won't say too much about this because I have talked about it recently, but I do love Brewster's Millions. This is another one of those ones that used to play on cable TV all the time, and I felt like I watched it over and over. I feel like I saw the film probably 20 times in my life. And once again, it's another one of those that I had only recently revisited this, right? I hadn't seen the film for so many years, and then I picked this up, and it was like I hadn't missed a beat. I remembered everything from this film, and it was just a lot of fun. I had a great time coming back to this one. So yeah, Brewster's Millions for my number 20. Okay, so that wraps it up for my list of 20, but I do have just a single honorable mention that I really felt like I needed to include in this list, but I didn't feel quite right putting it in the top 20, and I'm talking about Teen Wolf. This is really more of a personal choice for me because I'm not sure that everyone would necessarily feel as strongly about this one as I do, but I think this is some classic 80s nostalgia. Michael J. Fox, of course, as the teen werewolf. And I used to have a blast watching this one on TV back in the day when it came out, and it played quite a bit on cable. And I seem to remember coming across it quite a few times whenever I was looking for something to watch, and would end up just watching part or all of Teen Wolf. So yeah, I just wanted to mention this because I think it's a cool film, but not everybody's going to dig it. Some people think it's pretty cheesy, and it is, but it's fun. So yeah, so my one honorable mention today, Teen Wolf. Okay, so that about wraps it up for my top 20 essential 80s nostalgia flicks that I think every Gen X collector should have in their collection. Make sure you let me know what you think in the comments down below. What do you think of my choices here? What choices do you have that maybe I didn't include in this list that you feel are also pretty essential? I always love hearing from you guys and chatting with you guys, so make sure you leave me some feedback down below. Also, don't forget to like the video and subscribe if you're not already subscribed. Thank you so much for watching today. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you soon.